Dandadan is about two teenagers, the first being a girl named Momo, who's a Gyaru with a semi-obsession with the actor Ken Takakura, who did like a bunch of Yakuza movies and stuff, whose grandma is a spiritual medium and honestly a relatively important character in the grand scheme of the entire show. And this sort of friendless otaku who has an obsession with aliens, who is named Ken Takakura, although she gets flustered about this detail and calls him Okarun for most of the show. He has a big thing for aliens. Her grandma works with spirits, so they do not bond over this fact initially, because he mentions that aliens are real, she says ghosts are real, and they both make fun of each other, and so they make a bet that she's going to go to a place where aliens are supposed to be, he's going to go to a place where ghosts are supposed to be, and they're going to see which one's right. And of course, they were both right, and they get attacked by ghosts and aliens. There's a curse that comes up, and it's a whole thing. It works very similar to most other shonen series, which is there's like a series of smaller arcs that take place over a couple of episodes, although it actually moves at a sort of breakneck pace. I think season 1 covers, 3, 4 arcs or something? It's actually pretty impressive at how quickly it moves. And because every arc actually contributes in some way to the greater narrative of the show, it actually feels like the show is going somewhere and quickly. A really good aspect of it is the sort of dynamic between the main leads. They sort of bicker with each other a lot, and they're very snappy, and they have a lot of disagreements, but there's a sort of underlying friendship and a very palpable romantic subtext between them. In fact, the way the show is framed sort of displays that the show is sort of a supernatural urban fantasy romance action series. It's a very interesting mixture of genres, and honestly, I kind of wish we saw more content like this. It's also got a really interesting thing, which is that it is a show that explores both the supernatural and aliens, which is less common, but it also puts a sort of supernatural twist to the aliens. There's a sort of implications that aliens may have something to do with the yokai that the characters themselves encounter. The show also manages to introduce a third wheel into the romantic dynamic between the main characters. They managed to form a love triangle, and in one of the only instances I've ever seen this in, adding a third character to the relationship to form this love triangle, if anything, made the show better. Because one, it acts as a sort of interesting and satisfying form of friction, because it actually brings the two characters closer together, and it's aided by the fact that she has absolutely zero fucking chance. Because she immediately comes on to the male lead, and he is immediately like, absolutely not, this is not happening. He literally shoves her out of the way. He puts his full hand on her face and just pushes her when she tries to kiss him. So the fact that the secondary heroine has no chance, but also is used to enable the development and growth and greater understanding between the main characters is an interesting aspect that I would like to see more romance to start implementing. It's also benefited by the fact that I absolutely love her because she is a complete nutcase and is super delusional. Not that I don't like the main characters. I actually do like Okarun and Momo. I think they're also fantastic. There's very strong character designs in this as well. And they do introduce a sort of pseudo fourth love interest, making this a full polygon for Momo, which is like her first love and former childhood friend who sort of betrayed her when she made fun of her grandma. And when we see from the perspective of Okarun, who I said I was going to call him Ken the whole time, and I've stopped doing that. When we see through the perspective of Okarun, he is intimidated by this childhood friend / former crush as far as Momo goes, because he is starting to realize his feelings for Momo, which is one fucking refreshing that they're getting on with that already. I love how quickly the romantic subplots of this fucking show move as well. It's just, it is willing to have an idea and then explore it. It gives me very great faith for the actual series. Regardless, he is insecure in general, so when he sees the interactions between these two, naturally he's like, oh no, the childhood friend's gonna come by and steal her away. But whenever the perspective changes to Momo's perspective, you immediately get the idea that this guy has no chance and he is an absolute fucking goober. He is probably the only character I don't necessarily like in this show. I do find him kind of annoying. I don't hate him, but he does seem like a detraction point. I actually will say that as far as Ira, who is the failed romantic interest for the main character who has a thing for him, the sort of one-sided affection, she has two friends who are willing to just commit crimes for her. And I'm going to be honest, I find that a sort of respectable, admirable trait as far as her friends go. And I like Momo's friends too, because they're making an assumption that she's dating Okarun and they're willing to defend this relationship. So it's an interesting thing where like even like the mean girl's best friends are actually kind of cool characters. It's just sort of like that one guy that I'm like, Now, granted, his arc hasn't ended yet because the series ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, and I am willing to give him a chance and see if he grows on me like all of the rest of the cast did. Not that the rest of the cast really had to grow on me, I sort of liked them mostly from the beginning. The show also has a really good visual aspect to it. I think all of the character designs are very strong. I like the monster designs as well. When they make a monster, they manage to make it just off-putting enough that there's this always like nice aesthetic to it. The animation is solid for most of the show, although there is one episode where there's just clearly a 3D child running around, and I think that does not look great, but I will excuse that because I think it's also one of the strongest episodes of the entire show, which is the story about this mother who's basically doing whatever she can to protect her child. And the entire time I'm seeing this, because it's told through the version of a flashback, I'm like, okay, well, this kid's going to get hit by a truck, right? They're going to get hit by a truck is where this is going. And no, the ending was actually way darker and harsher than that, and actually led to the option of further exploring that set of characters that were basically about to die in the first place. And the fact that that was left open-ended and managed to go in such an interesting direction is in and of itself a very good accomplishment for Dandadan. And it also shows that the show isn't just limited to romance or action or comedy. It can do deeper, more emotional dramas and tragedies as well. So the show manages to have a good range of things that it is capable of accomplishing. Also worth noting, pretty solid soundtrack on this. The opening, of course, done by Creepy Nuts, who did the Martial Magic and Muscles opening, I think. I haven't actually seen that show. They also did Call of the Night's ending and worked on that soundtrack. They've been around for a while, but those are just what I think people know them most for. And yeah, that opening is fucking fantastic, all right? First off, there's also, I want to point out, one interesting track on the soundtrack as well, which is a sort of interesting modern remix of a mixture of William Tell's March of the Swiss Soldiers and Offenbach's Galop Infernal. And yeah, it's such a good chase theme. I think it might be called the chase theme or something like that. But yeah, you don't see symphonic music very often in anime. And when you do, it's usually sort of like custom made, like something like Hiroyuki Sawano did, for example. Or when they do it, it's usually like Mozart's Lacrimosa, which I believe was used in Hunter x Hunter, unless I'm completely wrong about that. But I'm pretty sure it was used in the York New arc in Hunter x Hunter. Anyway, so using non-very famous works, I guess those are pretty two famous songs, but they're not necessarily as famous as a Mozart, for example. And mixing them together to create its own little soundtrack in that instance, I did feel the need to bring it up. The song only plays twice, but I thought it was really interesting every time it played. So yeah, Dandadan kind of fires on every level, but you might have noticed that normally I would not review an anime this close to release date. And if you just want to watch the bulk of the review, you're basically done now. But I had a bit of a personal attachment to Dandadan. It's a very recent one, which is that I kept mixing out, every time I heard the name Dandadan, I mixed it up with a different series called Dead Dead Demons, Dead 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 Destruction. And yeah, so I just thought they were the same series until I eventually saw clips from Dandadan, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is absolutely something completely different. But then, as I learned about Dandadan, when I was like, okay, so if it's not Dead Dead Dead, what is Dandadan? And then I read the plot synopsis, and my brain was like, wow, this sounds like something I would write personally. And then I saw more clips of Dandadan, and I kept watching this like, oh, wow, this looks like something I would have made. And so I had to watch it to know like how similar this would be to my writing style. And I will say that having seen it now, it's definitely raunchier and more sexually charged than I would normally do. But otherwise, Dandadan is like very similarly to like if I made an anime. It's like crazily in line with what I would do, like to the point where even the main girl is a gyaru, which is something I would absolutely have done. In fact, it is so close to something that I would do and something I actually have done that one of the theories that Okarun posits is that the alien invasions are being held off by Earth's native monster yokai ghost population, which is a plot point that I have used in 2 separate tabletop role-playing games. It's not just something I would do. Dandadan uses plot points and ideas that I have already done. It is, if you were to tell me that when I go to sleep, my soul travels into the body of a Japanese mangaka to create this series, I would not be fucking surprised. So my attachment with Dandadan is, this is something that I would totally make if I had the opportunity for. It is so naturally in line with my style that I cannot help but love it. Twitch and Discord in the description. I've been Sacrobolic. You're Envoy of Hope. Bye-bye.